So last week we did Shloka 14. So in Shloka 14 of chapter 4, the Lord said, "There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work." So we discussed how here the Lord is using the word also. Also meaning it's a reference to the first sentence. Here the Lord was saying, whatever work he does, it does not affect him. And we discussed the difference between the lawmaker, who the laws apply to, the Jivatmas. And because the Lord transcends the three gunas, naturally nothing that he does affects him. Then the Lord is saying, I do not aspire for the fruits of action also. The Lord does not have a vested interest in a particular outcome. He simply acts out of sheer love. So the Lord is saying, anybody who understands this feature of mine, that I am beyond the three modes of material nature, and I do not engage for a particular outcome. Also, such a person who believes in that also does not become entangled in karmic reactions. Why? Because if you know the Lord, the next obvious thing to do is to surrender. What is left to do? If you know He is your Supreme Father, what else is left to do? Other than surrender, you don't have any other option. So if you've discovered that this is indeed the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the natural outcome of that is you would surrender. And when you surrender to the Lord, you do everything to please Him. And when you do everything to please Him, there is no karmic reactions for you. So that being said, we are going to go to text 15 today. Evam gyatva kritam karma purvairapi mumukshubhihi kuru karmaiva tasmat tvam purvaih purvataram kritam evam jnatva kritam karma purvairapi mumukshubhihi kuru karmaiva tasmat tvam purvaih purvataram kritam evam jnatva kritam karma purvairapi mumukshubhihi kuru karmaiva tasmat tvam purvaih purvataram kritam. Word for word meaning and translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki. Evam Dasi Nyatva knowing well Kritam was performed Karma work Purvaihi by past authorities
bypass authorities.
Api,
Api,
indeed,
indeed,
mumukshubhihi,
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 who attained liberation,
who attained liberation.
kuru,
Kuru,
just perform,
just perform.
karma,
Karma,
prescribed duty,
prescribed duty.
eva,
Eva,
certainly,
certainly.
tasmat,
Tasmat,
therefore,
therefore,
tvam,
tam,
you,
you,
purvaihi,
Purvai,
by the predecessors,
by the predecessors,
purvataram,
Purvataram,
in ancient times,
in ancient times,
kritam,
Kritam,
as performed.
as performed.
Translation. All the liberated souls
All the liberated souls
in ancient times
in ancient times
acted with this understanding
acted with understanding
of my transcendental nature.
of my transcendental nature.
Therefore, you should perform your duty,
Therefore, you should perform your duty,
following in their footsteps.
following their footsteps.
Purport. There are two classes of men. Some of them are full of polluted material things within their hearts, and some of them are materially free. Krishna consciousness is equally beneficial for both of these persons. Those who are full of dirty things can take to the line of Krishna consciousness for a gradual cleansing process, following the regulative principles of devotional service. Those who are already cleansed of the impurities may continue to act in the same Krishna consciousness so that others may follow their exemplary activities and thereby be benefited. Foolish persons or neophytes in Krishna consciousness often want to retire from activities without having knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Arjuna's desire to retire from activities on the battlefield was not approved by the Lord. One need only know how to act. To retire from the activities of Krishna consciousness and to sit aloof, making a show of Krishna consciousness, is less important than actually engaging in the field of activities for the sake of Krishna. Arjuna is here advised to act in Krishna consciousness, following in the footsteps of the Lord's previous disciples, such as the sun god Vivaswan, as mentioned herein before. The Supreme Lord knows all his past activities, as well as those of persons who acted in Krishna consciousness in the past. Therefore, he recommends the acts of the sun god who learned this art from the Lord some millions of years before. All such students of Lord Krishna are mentioned here as past liberated persons, engaged in the discharge of duties allotted by Krishna. So this is a pretty short purport by Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada is essentially saying there are only two categories of human beings: those who are conditioned, those who are liberated. What is the instruction for the conditioned? They should start practicing Krishna consciousness. Why? Because it's going to benefit them. Through practicing Krishna consciousness, what will happen? Slowly, your consciousness will be purified. Cheto darpana marjanam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, your heart is covered with filth. That dust has to be cleansed. So in the Shastras, when they refer to the fact that the soul is in the heart, the Shastras are not referring to the physical heart. The soul exists in the core of the consciousness. So when there is an reference to the fact that the soul is in the heart, it's not about the physical heart. It's really talking about that spark of consciousness that forms our core. So if we are not liberated, then Prabhupada advises us to practice Krishna consciousness. But if we think we are liberated, even then we should be practicing Krishna consciousness. Why? Because it sets the standards for others. And when you practice Krishna consciousness, even though you're fully liberated, because remember, Krishna says if you're liberated, there's no more duties for you. But still liberated souls continue to perform their duties because they know it benefits others. So then Prabhupada says, what do foolish people do? When they encounter too much trouble in their lives, they want to run in the other direction. They want to retire from the activities without having appropriate knowledge. Just like Arjuna wanted to give up and not fight on the battlefield. And Srila Prabhupada writes, Arjuna's desire to retire from activities on the battlefield was not approved by the Lord. And then Prabhupada is saying, one need only know how to act. To retire from the activities of Krishna consciousness and to go sit somewhere chanting the names of the Lord is not very important. What is more important? What is more important is to be active for the sake of Krishna. Meaning, we need to do our duties to please Krishna. So Krishna is telling Arjuna here, all of the liberated souls in the past, they have understood my nature. They've understood my instructions. And therefore, they have simply performed their duties. Now I'm asking you, they have already set an example for you. My devotees have set an example for you already. What is the problem? Why can't you follow in their footsteps? So many examples for you. What's interesting here is Lord Krishna uses Purva, Purvakaram, Purvakama. He's using the comparative, the superlative, and the positive. Purvair, Purvaihi, Purvataram. So he's saying in the past, in the past, in the past, these liberated souls have already understood my instructions and simply followed them. So Lord Krishna is saying, you don't have to take my advice. Why don't you follow the advice of the previous acharyas? Why don't you follow the actions of the previous acharyas? Don't do all kinds of research and waste your time. So the same problem of birth, death, old age, and disease has been there for time immemorial. Prabhupada says in one of his lectures that, no amount of modern civilization or technology is going to change that. So we cannot say, oh, these are modern times, I don't have to practice Krishna consciousness. It's so boring. It is so old. It is so silly. It is so sentimental. So here, Krishna is clearly saying, this problem of birth, death, old age, and disease has existed eternally and will continue. The solution for it is just one: to completely surrender to the Lord. No amount of advancement in civilization, advancement in technology is going to change these basic facts. So don't be idle. Krishna is saying, as per your guna and karma, you need to work. And then Prabhupada very brilliantly talks about why in modern society there is unemployment. Prabhupada asks the question, why in modern society there is unemployment? And he answers that question. There is unemployment in modern society, so-called modern, because people have not been trained up in Varnashram. Everybody, Prabhupada says, is being trained as a Kshudra. So if everybody is trained as a Shudra, where are the Brahmanas? Where are the Kshatriyas? Where are the Vaishyas? So recently in Russia, this war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine, the president of Russia established a rule suddenly that all the men between a certain age group had to sign up to fight. And all the men of that age group are leaving Russia. There was a photograph of a 10-mile length of cars leaving Russia. Why, if they love their country so much, why are they leaving? Prabhupada in a lecture in 1974 was saying, and this he was referencing to America at that time. In America at that time, the Vietnam War was going on. So the draft was in place. Draft means if you are a certain age, you have to perform service in the army. At that time, because of the Vietnam War, there was a great deal of disturbance by the hippies, by the youngsters who refused to join the army. And Prabhupada was asking why. Why were they not ready to join the army, to fight for their nation that they were so proud of? Because everybody is being trained to be a Shudra. There is no inclination to go pick up arms and fight. That's because nobody is being trained to be Kshatriya. So it's no surprise when the government suddenly issues a draft to fight. The men folk hesitate. So what will they do? They will claim they have some medical problem, or they'll just run. They'll leave the country. So Prabhupada is asking, the reason why there is unemployment is because the 4 divisions of society are not there. Nobody is being trained up to be Brahmanas. Prabhupada says in that lecture, first-class men should be trained up to be Brahmanas, to be intellectuals, to be teachers, to be philosophers, to be professors. Second-class men should be trained to be Kshatriyas. Third-class men should be trained to be Vaishyas. And those who cannot qualify for any of those 3 trainings should simply be satisfied serving the others as Shudras. So Prabhupada says training must happen. And he says, if there is unemployment in a country, the government has to be blamed. The government is responsible for unemployment. There is plenty of work available. And Prabhupada says, there is work available. Everybody should be engaged in Krishna consciousness. What's wrong with it? If everybody is engaged in Krishna consciousness, there will be no unemployment. So Prabhupada builds his case as to why this Varnashram system is so important in every society. So, and in that lecture, Prabhupada talks about what is the responsibility of the Brahmana class. This comes from Shastra. Patana Patan, Yajana Yajan, then Dana and Parigraha. Patana Patan means a Brahmana's main duty is to study and to teach. After he's absorbed what he studied, he should teach. That is Patana Patan. So the Brahmana has 6 responsibilities. Patana Patan. Then Yajana Yajan, which means he must first of all worship and engage others in the worship of the Lord. That's the the third and fourth duty of a Brahmana. What is the first duty? Patan Patan. He has to learn, he has to be a good student, and then he has to teach. Then Yajana Yajan. He should worship and he should engage others in worship. Worship of whom? The Supreme Lord. And then Dana and Pratigraha. Dana means he has to learn how to offer in charity, and he also has to learn how to receive in charity. So these are the 6 responsibilities of a Brahmana. So Prabhupada is asking, if everybody believes that you are a Brahmana by birth, there are certain category of personalities in our society who claim they are Brahmanas. If you become a Brahmana by birth, why do you need the thread ceremony? Prabhupada asks. If you are Brahmana by birth, why do you need the thread ceremony? You don't need the thread ceremony if everything happens by birth. And then Prabhupada explains beautifully. The thread ceremony is actually a certification process saying that this child has been trained up to be a Brahmana under the instructions of an Acharya. That's when you get the thread. Prabhupada says today meaning in 1974, this cotton thread costs 2 paisa. Anybody in today's world, what they do, when the ceremony comes for the Brahmana, suddenly he goes looking for a 2 paisa thread, he puts it on him and sits down for the yajna. Until then, he doesn't wear it. I know characters like that in my family. When the time comes to sit in front of the yajna kund, suddenly they are going in search for their Brahmin thread. Until then, it is hanging in the bathroom somewhere. Or it is not even there in the house. So we've made this thread ceremony so cheap. In our culture today, the Brahmins who are supposed to actually get the certification that they've qualified as Brahmanas from their acharyas, hurriedly, just the day before marriage, they will do the thread ceremony. Again, I've observed in my own family. Because without the thread, you can't get married as a Brahmana, so to speak. So one day before the wedding, however old the groom is, 30 years old, 35 years old, 45 years old, one day before, thread ceremony happens. So thread ceremony is a certification by your acharya, by the guru, that you have been trained up to be a Brahmin. So in this shloka, Lord Krishna is saying, follow in the footsteps of my previous devotees who have come and gone. They have established very nice process. And in the same lecture, Prabhupada talks about the 12 Mahajans. And actually, Prabhupada mentioned something that I never thought of before, even though I have read the shloka again and again and again, because Prabhupada refers to the shloka again and again and again from the Srimad Bhagavatam. I will not go over the shloka, but I will mention the 12 Mahajans' names. Yeah. So it's Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Narada Muni, the Sanat Kumaras, Kapila Muni, Yamaraj, Janaka Maharaj, Bhishma Dev, Bali Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj first, then Bali Maharaj, Manu, and Shukadev Goswami. And Prabhupada talks about one by one to let us know why anybody can be a Mahajan. You don't have to be a renunciate or a sannyasi to be a Mahajan. Then he says, Lord Brahma, he was a Grahastha. Shiva, he was a Grahastha. Narada Muni, Brahmachari. Yamaraj, Grahastha. Kapila Muni, Brahmachari. The Kumaras, Naishtika Brahmacharis. Janaka Maharaj, Grihastha. Prahlad Maharaj, Grihastha. Bali Maharaj, Grihastha. Manu, Grihastha. Shukadev Goswami, Brahmachari. So you have examples from both renunciate class as well as Grihasthas who are great Mahajans. Bhishma Dev also a Brahmachari. So Prabhupada is saying, Krishna never said, only follow the sannyasis. Only follow the instructions of those who have renounced this world. Krishna said, follow the Mahajans, and the Mahajans include Grihasthas. So Arjuna has a lot to pick from in terms of who he wants to follow. Krishna has also already mentioned Janaka Maharaj in chapter 3. Janak Maharaj is a Grihastha. He was a great devotee of the Lord. I was actually doing Rama Leela Katha today for another class. Some devotees had invited me to their house to do a class because Navaratri is going on. So we were speaking about Rama Leela today. And if you recall, from earlier this year when we were doing Ramayana, Janaka Maharaj initially was an impersonalist, which means he was worshipping the formless aspect of the Lord, Nirakar. And then he lays his eyes on Lord Ram and Lord Lakshman. And he asks Vishwamitra, why am I so attracted to these two individuals? They're so beautiful. I cannot take my eyes off of these young, beautiful looking personalities. And he asks Vishwamitra, is he the Supreme Lord? I have been worshipping the formless for so long. Is this the Supreme Lord himself? To which Vishwamitra simply replies and saying, my dear Maharaj, you already know everything. I don't have to explain to you. So after meeting Lord Ram, Janaka Maharaj becomes a personalist. He worships the form of the Lord as Shyama Sundara, as Lord Narayana. So coming back to the first 15 shlokas, let's just look at the trajectory, because we are going to go in a slightly different direction in the future shlokas. So what has Lord Krishna done? For the first time in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has spoken about himself and his position as the Supreme Lord. So in chapter 2, he does not speak about himself, although he does speak about the Paramatma. In chapter 3 also, he does not speak about himself directly, other than to say, even I perform my duties and responsibilities. But here in chapter 4, for the first time, he is directly telling Arjuna that I am the Supreme Lord. But in between, Arjuna asks a question. How can you be senior to Vivashwan? So this question has nothing to do with Arjuna's dilemma on the battlefield. This question about the facts on the ground as to who is Lord Krishna and who is this sun god Vivaswan has nothing to do with Arjuna's dilemma. Arjuna has asked a question in response to what the Lord has said. And in response to that question, the Lord talks about himself. So what does the Lord say? Now, both you and I have had many births. The difference is I can remember all of them, but you cannot. And then he says, I am Aja, I am unborn. My body never deteriorates. And then he says, I come repeatedly. I come repeatedly to establish dharma. So in 7 and 8, the Lord is talking about how often he comes and when he comes and why he comes. And then in 13, the Lord says, I actually reciprocate with everybody. Everybody belongs to me. I reciprocate with them in response to their level of surrender. And then he says, sorry, that was in Shloka 11. Then in 13, he says, just in case they are not able to fully surrender to me, just in case, I have established the Varnashrama system so that they can gradually elevate themselves until they become my devotees. So what is the connection here? We've kind of gone off topic. So what is the connection? The connection here is dharma. So Arjuna's question is, who are you and how come you are older than Vivaswan? In response to that, the Lord answers his question. Now, in 15, what has the Lord done? The Lord has brought Arjuna back to what the original discussion was, which is, should I walk away? Or should I work? You've confused me, Krishna. So how dexterously the Lord answers Arjuna's question and brings the topic back to what they were discussing earlier. So the Lord could say, hey, I can keep talking about myself. I'm the greatest. I'm the wisest. I'm the best at everything. So briefly, the Lord responds to Arjuna and then he brings him back to his original quandary. Should I fight or should I work without attachment? So logically, the Lord has said now, what is dharma? Dharma is within the varnashram construct, we have to each do our duties as per which varna and ashrama we are occupying. So what is the varna that Arjuna is occupying? He is a kshatriya. Kshatriyas are meant to protect dharma. And kshatriyas can use violence judiciously to re-establish dharma. Brahmana cannot engage in violence. Again, going back to Ramayana, when Vishwamitra approaches King Dasharatha, Vishwamitra was a powerful rishi. He could have killed the demons himself. But that was not his role. He would be stepping out of the boundary. He is a Brahmana. It's not that he could not have killed. That duty of violence is really left to the Kshatriyas. A Brahmana should not engage in violence. Quite the opposite. A Brahmana's one of the core responsibilities of the Brahmanas or features of the Brahmana is to be non-violent. So Krishna is saying, you are Kshatriya, your duty is to protect Dharma. And yes, sometimes you have to engage in violence to re-establish Dharma. And therefore, you need to fight. And I have given you plenty of examples of how others have followed my instructions. So very dexterously, the Lord brings the topic back to the fact that Arjuna has to fight. So great souls have appeared in the past, and their examples are there for us to follow. So Krishna says, simply follow in the footsteps of previous great souls who have been my devotees. So all Arjuna has to do is follow the previous example. If he does, Krishna says, liberation awaits him. So what is important to note here is that work itself doesn't bind us. What binds us is the motivation behind our work. If our motivation is greed, if our motivation is to conquer somebody else, if our motivation is less than stellar, that is what actually binds us. But work itself does not bind you. It's your intent and motivation behind what you try to do that actually causes you karmic reactions. Therefore, Krishna has said, you work with attachment to the duty itself, but do it in such a way, in devotional mood towards me, that it ultimately will liberate you. Which means Krishna is saying, you can begin with karma yoga. If you begin with karma yoga, you will end in bhakti yoga. So Naishkarmya karma yoga will actually lead to bhakti yoga. So be attached to the duty, but be detached from the results. Eventually, it should lead to bhakti. Second thing is, now Krishna has said, follow what others have done in the past. They have set an example for you. But does that mean Arjuna should follow others in the past blindly? Should he not use his intellect to make a decision as to what's right for his situation? Is Krishna saying there are plenty of examples from the past, just follow? No, that's not what Krishna is expecting. So here, if you go back to the example of the 12 Mahajans, there are brahmacharis and there are grahasthas. So there are those who have renounced material life, and there are those who are very much engaged in the world and in material life. So now Arjuna has a choice. Should he follow the path of the sages who have given up everything? Or should he follow the path of righteous kings who are liberated, but still were performing their duties, still were engaged with their earthly duties and responsibilities, bodily duties and responsibilities? So the question now for Arjuna is, should he follow the righteous kings? Should he follow the path of the saints? Which tradition should he follow? The sages or the kings? So at that time, what Arjuna needs to make a decision on is, what is his purpose? When you are in a quandary where two good options are there for Arjuna, he can give up fighting or he can fight. He can choose the path of liberation, or he can work and still achieve liberation. So when you're in this quandary, you have to worry about what's your purpose. You have to use your intelligence to understand what is your purpose. So let's say, for example, in the past, you have heard that there is a certain place that your ancestors or the acharyas used to go take a holy dip in the river. We know that the rivers change course. So would we be very smart if we go to that same place where your ancestors took a holy dip, or where you've heard great souls took a holy dip, except the river is no longer there? Would that be very smart? So we are expected to use our intelligence. Obviously, you cannot take a dip in a river that no longer is there. It has changed its course. It's not a very smart thing to do. So the first thing to focus on is, what is the purpose? To understand your purpose, you have to go back to your guna and karma. What is Arjuna's guna? He's a Kshatriya. He has a natural inclination to fight. He's a powerful fighter. So you have to focus on purpose. Then you can make your decision based on how you've understood what your purpose is in life. So Krishna does not expect you to blindly follow. Yes, one must have faith in the previous acharyas and the Mahajans as well. But that doesn't call for blind following. So you have to use your intelligence. So on the one hand, you should not blindly follow past rituals. On the other hand, you should not cynically reject all past rituals also. So you can't be on either extremes, blind following or cynical rejection, saying it's all useless, all the past thing, oh, so old-fashioned. It's not very modern. It doesn't make sense. So both, we should not fall trapped to both. So you have to remember that if the river changes course, then you can't go there and take a dip. You have to go find where that river is now, and then find the place where you're supposed to actually take the dip, right? So another question comes when it comes to karma. You know, I'm relying on Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's Gita Daily articles, where he says, you know, typically in a difficult situation, Arjuna could have asked, why are bad things happening to me? I am a good person. Frequently, this is the question that is asked. Why do bad things happen to good people? And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says, that's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, what do good people do when bad things happen to them? Because then they have set an example that you can follow. How is it going to help us to find out logically why bad things happen to good people? How is that going to help us? It's not very instructive. So the more mature question is, what do good people do when bad things happen to them? So Krishna has already said, as you, the Bible actually says this, as you sow, so shall you reap, which means whatever you have planted, that's what is going to come as a fruit back to you. That means two things are addressed. Karma is there, reincarnation is also there. Sometimes you have to take birth again and again and again to experience the results of what you've done in the past. So actually, in the next 2 weeks, we'll come to a shloka, which is Sloka 17, where the Lord says, karma and the way it acts, it's very hard for us to understand. So the Bhagavad Gita although we talk about karma a lot because that's such a complicated topic, and that's the most interesting topic for people to figure out. And generally, the people who are interested in understanding karma are the ones who are suffering because they want answers. But actually, in reality, the Bhagavad Gita actually does not focus on karma at all. There are maybe 5 or 6 shlokas on karma in the Bhagavad Gita. So if Krishna is not focusing on karma, he doesn't want you to focus on karma. He wants you to simply understand karma exists. Because you have to experience the results of your past activities, which include activities in your past life. Krishna wants you to understand. So then what is the focus of Bhagavad Gita? If it is not karma, what is it? It is actually dharma. Krishna says, don't worry about karma. Karma will act on you. That is why he keeps saying, tolerate. He's saying winter and summer will come. Happiness and distress will come. What can you do? Just tolerate. Deal with it. But again and again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, what is Krishna harping on? Not karma. It is dharma. Do your duty, do your duty, do your duty. He's repeating the same thing again and again and again. So it's an instruction for you and me that when we go through difficulties, we don't question karma when we get good things in our life. We only question it when bad things happen. But Krishna is not interested too much in karma. He's already said, it's too difficult to understand, forget it. Don't worry about it. We'll come to that 17th shloka. So the Bhagavad Gita does not focus on karma. You and I focus on karma for 2 classes. In the secrets of the Gita revealed, there are 2 classes on karma, I think, or maybe 1 class. Because such an intricate topic and everybody wants to know what's that logic that Krishna is using to punish you or reward you. We are desperate to know that. And Krishna is saying you'll never find out. That's not important. Krishna focuses on, we all have to do our duty. In the process of doing our duty, we may come across experiences that are good, bad, indifferent. We have to learn to tolerate. And then, in this shloka that we read today, when Krishna says, there are examples already set in the past. You should follow in their footsteps. So there are those personalities who are pure devotees of the Lord, but who went through terrible times. What are some examples?
Janak Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj.
Prahlad Maharaj, multiple assassination attempts by his own father. Can you think of something more horrible than that? How did Prahlad Maharaj respond? What's another example? So Prahlad Maharaj is one. We'll go to the Bhagavatam only. Parikshit? Pandavas themselves, yes. Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to die in 7 days. He's such a powerful king and he's such a pure devotee. He could have easily negated that curse if he wanted to. And he didn't do anything egregious. Okay, he put a dead snake around a rishi out of anger. But that was not a horrible, inexcusable act. But what price did he pay? How did he respond? He said, yes, time has come for me to give up my kingdom and focus on Bhakti. So the Bhagavatam has many examples of good devotees of the Lord who have undergone suffering. So Krishna is saying, follow in their footsteps. Don't worry about karma. Anywhere in the Bhagavatam, have you heard Prahlad say, why me? What did I do in the past? I have never hurt my dad. Why is he trying to assassinate me? Parikshit Maharaj never asked, why me? So the focus of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam is not karma, although we are very interested in it. It is actually what is our duty and responsibility. So the question is, don't ask, why are bad things happening to me? Because first of all, you are assuming you're a good person. Okay, let's say we are all good people. Why do bad things happen to us? Let's just see, what have good people done when bad things have happened to them? How have they dealt with that situation? They have tolerated. So the only lesson for us in this here, when the Lord says, follow the instructions of others before you. And he says, those who have understood me, implying that they are all his devotees. When Lord Krishna is referring to those who have understood this about my nature, he is referring to them as liberated souls in ancient times, acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, perform your duty, following in their footsteps. You are in turmoil, I know. You don't know what you need to do, I know. Take a leaf out of the books of those who have followed before you. That is Krishna's instruction to Arjuna in this particular shloka. We'll stop here for the day.